Life has a peculiar way of shifting without warning. One afternoon, I found myself crouched among my flower beds, soil caked beneath my fingernails, completely focused on pruning the wild jasmine vines. Suddenly, a presence fell across my shoulders, and quiet steps approached from behind. Every fiber in my body went rigid before I even glanced up. A moment of stillness. When I finally turned, there stood my neighbor, his face calm yet unreadable. The encounter that followed continues to echo in my thoughts, not merely for its unexpectedness, but for the lesson it offered about human bonds and the subtle ways strangers can transform each other's worlds. Before sharing what unfolded, I'm curious. Where might you be reading this? I find myself wondering about the distant places these tales reach. That particular day began ordinarily enough. Gentle warmth bathed everything, filtered through the ancient oak that has watched over my backyard far longer than I've called this place home. The fragrance of fresh earth mingled with blooming honeysuckle. My garden serves as my refuge, the single space where chaos becomes order. Carefully tended rose flourishing beneath my watchful eye. Every bloom positioned precisely where it should be. I had bent low to trim an unruly stem when the soft scrape of pebbles reached my ears from the narrow walkway. My property lacks fencing, making it common for neighbors to pass through occasionally, yet something felt different this time. The footfalls were unhurried, intentional, suggesting whoever approached meant to find me specifically. An unexpected visitor. Upon turning, I discovered David standing there. We've shared this street for nearly 2 decades, trading courteous nods and weather-related pleasantries, though never anything deeper. He's a reserved gentleman, perhaps in his mid-60s, possessing a tranquil demeanor that somehow compels you to speak more softly around him. His graying hair appeared slightly windswept, and he wore a worn flannel shirt with sleeves pushed up, revealing forearms dusted with wood shavings from his crafting endeavors. "Didn't intend to surprise you," he offered, his voice gentle yet carrying clearly through the afternoon stillness. I wiped my palms against my work clothes, attempting to calm the unexpected flutter in my chest. "You didn't," I replied, though we both knew otherwise. Just wasn't anticipating visitors. A subtle smile crossed his features, as if he could read past my polite deflection. His attention drifted toward the climbing vines. "These look healthier than last season. You've put considerable effort in." I acknowledged his observation with a nod, puzzled why my heartbeat remained elevated. Something in his stance, not overwhelming but fully present, made me feel completely visible. I gestured toward the wooden framework behind me. Attempting to prevent them from conquering everything, they seemed determined to expand. Closer connection, he moved nearer, not intrusive, but close enough that I caught hints of pine and clean cotton. His weathered hands hung relaxed at his sides. Neither of us filled the silence that followed. Only gentle leaf movements and distant bird songs surrounded us. Then came his question. "Do you ever grow weary of managing everything yourself?" His words struck unexpectedly. I couldn't determine whether he meant the gardening specifically or something more encompassing. The weight of unspoken understanding settled between us. My mouth opened to answer, then hesitated, sensing that my response might unlock something I wasn't prepared to face. An invitation. Extended. Rather than pushing, he surveyed the garden with quiet admiration, his gaze lingering on the small wooden seat nestled in the corner beneath spreading branches. "That's an ideal location," he observed softly. "Perfect view of everything from there." "It's where I retreat," I confessed. "Sometimes I sit there after sunset, simply listening." His smile deepened slightly while his eyes remained contemplative. "Perhaps I could join you sometime if you wouldn't object." The words seemed casual, almost offhand, yet they carried an undercurrent that caught my breath. I assured myself it was merely neighborly kindness. Still, I sensed the shift, a subtle atmospheric change surrounding us. We continued chatting briefly about persistent raccoons raiding my vegetable patch and his current woodworking creation. Then he departed as quietly as he'd arrived, moving slowly along the stone path until the hedgerow concealed him. I remained there long afterward, garden shears forgotten in my grip, watching shadows lengthen as day waned. reflection, and anticipation. Something about our meeting had stirred me, though not unpleasantly. It felt as though a door had been left slightly ajar in a room I hadn't visited for years, and I could sense an invitation to enter. That evening, settled in my quiet living space, I kept returning to the moment I'd turned to find him there. The kindness in his expression, the feeling that his words held deeper meaning than their surface suggested. It lingered. I had no idea what might develop from this encounter, if anything at all. Yet I knew with certainty that during my next garden session, I'd be listening for the sound of approaching footsteps on stone. The return, several peaceful days passed, though my mind refused to settle completely. Each garden visit found me glancing toward the pathway, alert for that familiar scraping sound. I told myself such thoughts were foolish. People rarely appear simply because you're expecting them. Yet the memory of David's calming presence persisted like lavender fragrance lingering after a breeze passes. It was Thursday when it occurred again. I knelt pulling stubborn dandelions from between the flagstones when a recognizable shadow stretched across the grass nearby. My pulse quickened as before, though this time I didn't tense. Turning revealed him standing there, hands tucked in pockets, squinting slightly against the bright light. "Thought you might appreciate some assistance," he said. I chuckled, brushing earth from my hands. "You realize this qualifies as unpaid manual labor?" "That's perfectly fine," he responded, stepping closer. "I've always enjoyed working with my hands." Something in his delivery, measured, deliberate, seemed to thicken the air slightly. Working together. He knelt beside me, his shirt sleeve grazing my arm as he reached for a cluster of weeds. For several minutes we labored silently, our movements finding a natural synchronization. It felt surprisingly comfortable having him there in my sanctuary, as if his presence belonged. Eventually he sat back, dabbing his brow with his sleeve. "You've created something remarkable here," he said. "It radiates tranquility." I studied him curiously. Tranquil isn't always my description. Sometimes it's simply overwhelming. "Perhaps," he replied, his focus shifting from flowers to me. "But it's work that creates lasting beauty. That's uncommon." His words settled into me in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. We remained there discussing everything and nothing. How seasons seemed increasingly brief, how our neighborhood had evolved since we'd both arrived, our shared distaste for supermarket produce. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, the kind that makes time disappear. At some point, his gaze found the corner bench. "You mentioned sitting there evenings," he reminded me. "I do," I confirmed. "An evening together. Perhaps tonight?" The suggestion seemed casual, yet I felt something solid within it that made acceptance feel inevitable. So I agreed. That evening, as sunset began painting the sky, I carried 2 glasses of lemonade to the bench. David appeared minutes later, maintaining that same measured pace. We settled side by side, close enough to sense each other's warmth without touching. The heavens displayed shades of coral and deep purple while honeysuckle sweetened the air. Initially, we spoke little, instead absorbing cricket songs, leaf whispers, and occasional bench creaks beneath us. It was the kind of silence that communicates more than words ever could. Finally, he spoke. "Most people hurry past moments like these," he said quietly, always focused on what comes next. "I spent many years doing exactly that. And now?" I prompted. "Now I'm discovering how to truly observe things, to pause." His eyes found mine, steady and searching. People as well, not just gardens. Warmth bloomed in my chest, unrelated to the drink or summer air. I didn't respond immediately, concerned that words might shatter the moment's magic. Instead, I let silence expand, trusting his understanding. Growing trust, we remained until darkness claimed the final light traces and early stars emerged. When he finally rose to leave, he paused briefly, seemingly weighing additional words. Ultimately, he simply smiled and bid me good night. Watching him depart, I realized whatever was developing between us moved at its own rhythm. Unhurried, intentional, like his footsteps on stone. For the first time in ages, I felt no urge to accelerate. And the following week brought those golden late summer days that make you forget worlds exist beyond your own yard. Mornings meant garden tending. Afternoons brought porch reading, while I half expected, half hoped for David's reappearance. When he didn't come, I convinced myself it was probably better. Whatever this was needn't become something I overthought. Yet, one evening while rinsing dishes at the kitchen sink, I spotted him through the window. He stood at my yard's edge, studying the jasmine vines. This wasn't casual neighboring, it was purposeful. Deeper sharing, I stepped outside, screen door clicking behind me. "Good evening," I called. His smile came easily, though something else showed, perhaps uncertainty. "Evening. I was returning from my workshop and thought I'd check your progress." I laughed softly. "Progress moves slowly. Plants don't rush." He approached, hands in pockets. "Neither should we." That familiar unspoken weight hung between words again. He glanced toward the oak bench, then back to me. "May I sit?" We moved to our familiar spots, settling as before. The air wrapped around us gently warm. Fireflies began their evening dance while a distant dog barked once before quieting. After some time, David shifted slightly toward me. "May I share something?" I nodded, uncertain what to expect. After losing my wife, I assumed the silence would be hardest, but it wasn't. It was realizing how completely I'd stopped allowing anyone close. People made attempts, but I always found ways to maintain distance. I convinced myself it was safer. His words carried the weight truth often does. "I understand," I said gently. "I've done similar things in my own way." His gaze remained steady. "Being here with you feels different. Like perhaps things don't have to remain that way." Something shifted within me then. Small but unmistakable. I wasn't certain I was ready for whatever this represented, but I knew I wouldn't turn away. "They don't," I said. Simple gestures. We sat. Quietly, letting the significance of what had been shared settle into evening air. Then, as if sensing the moment needed grounding, he reached into a small paper bag he'd carried and produced 2 perfect ripe peaches. "From my tree," he said almost bashfully. I laughed, tension easing. "A peace offering?" "More of a promise," he replied. We talked until stars thickened overhead, voices low, conversation drifting from youthful memories to quiet joys we'd learned to cherish. There was no rushing, no pushing toward conclusions, just steady, unhurried building of something we both seemed to understand without naming. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated briefly, his hand resting on the bench back. "See you." "Soon," I nodded. "You will." A gift of trust. After his departure, I lingered there, peaches in my lap, air still carrying warmth from his presence. I realized then that I'd stopped listening for his footsteps on stone, not because I no longer wanted to hear them, but because I trusted they would come. Following days flowed in a rhythm I hadn't known I'd been missing. Morning coffee, light weeding, neighborhood sounds drifting through air. I no longer waited for David, not in that restless way. Instead, I simply continued, knowing that when the time felt right, he would appear. It was late Sunday afternoon when familiar stone scraping reached my ears. I sat on the oak bench, unopened book in my lap, sun casting long golden shadows across everything. David walked toward me, not hurried, just that same deliberate pace, carrying a small wooden box. "I made something for you," he said upon reaching. Me. I examined the box. Simple yet beautiful, with warm, rich wood grain and edges smoothed by careful work. "It's lovely," I said, fingertips tracing its surface. "What's inside?" He smiled faintly. "Just a small space for keeping whatever matters to you." Opening it revealed emptiness except for faint cedar fragrance. I understood then. It wasn't about contents but intention, the offering itself, a place for whatever I chose to treasure. Present moments. We sat with the box between us, neither speaking for a long while. Air carried rose and earth scents while leaves rustled softly overhead. When I finally met his gaze, I saw that same steadiness that had been there since his first garden appearance. But now something additional showed. Quiet trust. I don't know where this leads. I admitted softly. But I appreciate where we are. Me too, he said. No need to rush. We remained until sun dipped low and evening's first cool breath touched the air. When he rose to leave, he didn't reclaim the box. It's yours, he said simply. After his departure, I sat holding it, considering how some connections don't announce themselves with fanfare or dramatic gestures. They arrive quietly, like footsteps on stone, and grow in spaces between words. That night, I placed the box on my bedside table. I didn't put anything inside, not yet. I wanted to wait for the right moment when something felt important enough to preserve there. As I turned out the light, I realized I wasn't wondering whether David would visit again. I knew he would, and when that time came, I'd be ready to hear those footsteps once more, steady and certain, carrying with them a peace I hadn't known I needed.